Hi, I'm Nicholeen Peck, and I teach all about parenting and relationships, communication, and self-government. And there is a question that gets asked to me periodically, and that is, how can I help my child with ADHD? So as a parent of 4 children and previous foster parent of many troubled teens, and a person who's now been teaching parenting all over the world for many years, there is something that I can tell is very common, a lot more common than many people like to think it is, and that is ADHD. Nearly all of the foster children that came to my home between the ages of 12 and 18 had ADHD as one of the things on their chart that they were working through. And that was something that I was supposed to help them with treatment with. And so I'm going to talk to you in this video about what I did to help those children and what you can do to help the children that you know with ADHD too. It's super important to understand what's going on inside a person's mind that has ADHD. And if you haven't been there, you don't really know. But after lots of years of talking to people about what was really happening, what they were really thinking, the anxieties that they were having, the worries and the feelings, I know that what's happening inside their brains is sometimes pretty hard to handle. So many of my foster children would say to me things like, I just can't focus. I try, but I just can't. Or they would say, I feel so numb. I don't like feeling like this. There were many things that they were dealing with that made them feel like they were broken. And so there really isn't much point in bringing up again and again that they have ADHD. What they really need are things that they can do to make it feel like they're taking control of their lives, because we can all take steps towards skill development and changing our mindset, deliberately making choices with our thoughts and actions that can empower us and make our lives very different. The best types of skills to teach a person who has ADHD, or really for anyone for that matter, are skills that are predictable and skills that decrease anxiety. So children always have a certain amount of anxiety anyway, just because they're little and they're learning and they make mistakes and everybody seems bigger than them and stuff like that. But children with ADHD oftentimes have higher levels of anxiety because they are struggling to maintain a focus with what's going on around them. They also have a tendency to be overstimulated by their environment. And when they get overstimulated, that also increases their anxiety. So anything that you use to help a child with ADHD needs to be predictable and decrease anxiety while also increasing their personal empowerment. The skills that I'm going to be sharing with you on this video will be skills that you can use for any child, but are especially beneficial for children with ADHD. Your child with ADHD will really benefit from learning 4 basic skills. These children's books each teach one of the 4 basic skills. They teach following instructions, accepting no answers and criticism, accepting consequences, and disagreeing appropriately. When a person learns the skill sets for these 4 basic skills, it decreases their anxiety because they know exactly what to do next, and when they make a mistake, they know how to fix it. In fact, if there was one thing that the foster children that came to my home struggled with at the beginning, was anxiousness, not knowing how to fix their problems. But once they really mastered the 4 basic skills, and then I would do a correction, they would be able to easily see where they made a mistake and what piece needed to be fixed in that skill set so that next time they wouldn't make the same mistake again. Predictability, a nice, easy, simple thought process to go through, skills that they can hold onto to use as a guide, and increased confidence when the corrections come because they already know the answer to fixing their problem before the correction even happens. We're going to talk more about these 4 basic skills and how you can use them, but before we do that, leave me a comment below and let me know what types of behaviors are happening at your house because of the ADHD. And I'll take some time to look at those and see if I can give you some personal advice. So let's talk about these 4 basic skills. The basic one of all 4 of those 4 basic skills is following instructions. Now that one presents a little bit of a problem for a person with ADHD, especially if that person is really struggling to focus. To follow instructions, you look at the person, keep a calm face, voice, and body, say okay or ask to disagree appropriately, do the task immediately, and then check back. Check back is the last step. That's the hardest step for a person with ADHD to get to. So I teach the children those 5 steps to following instructions and then remind them that they have to get to the check back. Even if they do all of the other 4 steps, they will still be corrected if they don't get to the check back. So they have to think, get to the check back, get to the check back, get to the check back again and again in order to stay focused. When they get to the check back, then I praise them. So they need to know that they did well. Oftentimes a person with ADHD, because they're corrected so often, they get pretty down on themselves because they lose focus repeatedly. So corrections have to be done consistently. So it's also vital that you consistently praise when things go right. If you teach them to get all the way to that check back, to come to you and say, Mom, I took out the garbage and I replaced the garbage liner. Is there anything else? Then that gives you the opportunity many times throughout the day to praise the child. For a child to learn self-government, they need to be praised 6 to 10 times for every one time that you correct them. That's important. And it's also important for just their overall morale. So following instructions is going to be a big skill for your child with ADHD. In fact, if any of your children, whether they have ADHD or not, refuses to follow an instruction, you actually can't parent them. That is the baseline skill that establishes the roles between parent and child. When you correct your child with ADHD, you've got to have patience. And I know that's easier said than done, but it's important. So they need consistent correction, but they also need calm and loving correction. Your tone makes a big difference in all of those corrections that you give your child. In fact, in all of your discussions that you have with your child with ADHD, it should be done with a tone of understanding. They're dealing with a lot. They have more worries than you do. Recognize that. Let them talk about some of those things with you and help them make plans for their future. So when your children need to be corrected or when you need to have a discussion, make sure you tell yourself to take the time that's needed to discuss whatever it is. And be sure to repeat back some of the statements that they say to you so they know you're really understanding. Also, make sure you don't take any of their statements personally because sometimes their processing might be a little bit different than you are processing the same situation. But still, you need to do corrections. So even though you're calm and loving, compassionate, and patient, you still need to make sure that you do consistent corrections for them because they have to train themselves just like everybody else does. So it is loving to correct our children, and a child with ADHD does need to have consistent correction. There are many parents who mistakenly assume that because their child has ADHD that they shouldn't correct as many of their mistakes and their troubling behaviors. But that is not a service to them. In fact, then they never learn to control themselves. You need to lovingly help them learn to accept your corrections and even learn how to correct themselves. When a person is truly self-governed, they give themselves instructions and no answers, corrections, and they have good, appropriate disagreements, sometimes even with themselves. Self-government is achievable for a person with ADHD. I've seen it many times, and I know that your child can learn principles and skills of self-government too. One of the things you can do to help your children succeed with dealing with ADHD is recognize when they trap themselves. There is a class that I've created here on YouTube for anyone who wants to see it called The Expectation Trap versus the Cycle for Success. I highly recommend that you go and watch that video now so that you can help yourself and your children avoid expectation traps that might be getting in the way from those happy days that you all want so much. Click on the link now and we'll see you there.